Welcome to the Chatbot Roadshow. I'm Greg Kiefer, joined today by Samir Khanna and Justin Marjuki. We're going to do a demonstration of the LifeLink Systems Therapy Enrollment and Access Solution. Gentlemen, good to have you on the webinar today.
Thanks for having us.
Let's jump in.
Okay, so before we start, there is a challenge that manufacturers face, which is all about getting patients into their therapy and staying with their therapy. And these numbers point to a pretty big challenge. Wouldn't you agree, Samir?
Yeah, there's no denying this is an absolute challenge for pharma. Up to 33% of all patients actually face coverage rejections every year, and that can get in the way of patients ultimately receiving the medications that they need. The other challenge for pharmaceutical companies to think through here is the kind of engagement and trust that they maintain with patients as well.
Right. And as you think about onboarding, where somebody's been prescribed a pretty complex, expensive drug, it's no easy path for them to get into the therapy and remain on that path.
No denying that. Again, patients really face a lot of complexity here, whether we're thinking about specialty drugs or non-specialty drugs, thinking about presumptive fill programs, prior authorizations, benefits verifications. This is a lot of complex information that patients just are not exposed to on a day-to-day basis. So it is a challenge for pharma to ultimately figure out how can they communicate clearly and succinctly with patients.
Right. And of course, this is not new news to the pharmaceutical industry. And the way that most companies are addressing this is through hubs, whether they insource or hire an outsourced provider. But these are largely phone-based call center programs, which really face a number of challenges when you think about, scale and time and complexity.
Exactly. And for better or worse, pharma has been a little bit disintermediated with their patients, having to contract with hubs. And when a patient is ultimately paying up to $50,000 for a medication and they don't know who is calling them about what, Bob, Jill, and John are calling me about, am I staying adherent? Am I getting my refills? Is my benefits verified? They don't know what's going on. So for pharmaceutical companies to rethink how they engage patients is a heck of an opportunity for them.
Right. And if you think about all those interactions that are being performed by scripted human agents, a lot of those interactions could be offloaded. Maybe 80% of the communications are scripted and could be automated through a conversational chatbot. That's a lot of time and energy that could be automated.
Exactly. And kind of getting into some of the details here, thinking about whether it's data collection or something more about financial responsibility and thinking about how much is my medication going to be. I mean, that's a problem that every patient is familiar with. How those processes and those tasks can be automated to improve patient engagement down the line. Again, huge opportunity for pharma.
Yep, right. And so, when you think about what's taking place in the world of technology, there is a movement afoot that fits naturally into some of the challenges that we just covered. And that's this notion of conversational technology that's mobile, it's interactive, it uses messaging to communicate. And a lot of consumers in banking, travel, other service industries are using this technology to perform all sorts of tasks routinely. And it's a ripe opportunity to take this innovation and apply it to the world of medication adherence and onboarding.
Totally. Thinking about how pharmaceutical companies and hub companies can actually augment their staff with this sort of technology to ultimately achieve some of the engagement that we take for granted, whether it's booking a flight or what we've seen interacting with our bank. I mean, it's time for pharmaceutical companies to kind of step up and engage their patients as well.
Right. And I think the important distinction to call out here is that we're not talking about replacing the important human-to-human interactions that are required for some of these complex therapies, but so much of that interaction are just basic check-ins or basic asks for information that are ripe for automation. So when you look at the workflow that we're talking about here, there's an end-to-end process that when you think of scaling, you're looking at a workflow that unfolds like this.
Absolutely. And as we've discussed here, there are at least a dozen different areas where you can think about how to engage patients, whether that's when they start a medication all the way through to them maintaining that medication adherence for years on end.
Okay, well, let's jump into the demo here and show everyone how this all works with the LifeLink system solution.
Great. At LifeLink, we've built the conversational engagement layer that can sit on top of an existing hub's operations and systems. And whether that's initial conversation around enrollment or status updates or patient reported outcomes, we can stitch in with agents, CRM systems, outbound phone calls to deliver a 10x patient experience. So let's jump in here and just show what a few of these conversations feel like for patients. So let's start with enrollment and benefits verification.
So when thinking about benefits verification, status updates are really crucial. And there's a number of steps that patients have to navigate through. But what we're actually going to show you here is how pharmaceutical companies or hubs could actually utilize data from their CRMs and make it digestible for the patient. That applies across the board to status updates, verifying that the benefits are up to date and ready to go, or actually fulfilling the medication and making sure that the patient knows where and when to pick it up at a pharmacy near them.
Right. And this is part of equipping hubs with an omni-channel strategy, right? This is the same information that traditionally you would have an agent read off a script, but you can reach out by text message and get patients into these very easy to understand personalized conversations within seconds, whether you're 18 years old or 80 years old.
Absolutely.
So you can imagine that there are several conversations that you might have with a patient around their enrollment status, right? As you're coordinating shipment and benefits verification, prior authorization for that patient. But fast forward 6 months, the patient is now on therapy, right? And now we need to jump into additional education adherence that we know is relevant for that patient once they're on therapy.
Exactly. Once you're on the therapy, you need to really think about how does the patient interact with that therapy on a day-to-day basis, whether that means going in and figuring out how to get a refill and also educating them about potential side effects that might be felt over time. And then making sure that the patient is actually going to stay adherent, figuring out what their behavior actually is. Oftentimes, what it says on the label in terms of how often a patient should be taking a medication is quite different than how the patient actually takes their medication. So pharmaceutical companies do have quite the opportunity here to think through how they can utilize conversational technology to engage their patients for adherence and further use cases down the line.
Right. It's a pretty exciting opportunity to move beyond the kind of tactical steps of a hub and move into all of the support programs and educational programs, right, that patient might be interested in that pharma companies have already invested money in. So it's a really nice 2-for-1 opportunity to stitch together support and access teams at a pharmaceutical manufacturer to deliver a consistent patient experience. So you can imagine that across a full pharmaceutical program that includes dozens of conversations, each of those conversations are very tightly instrumented so that you can understand patient engagement, not just on a high level, but you can understand chat bubble by chat bubble, which patients are interacting, how long they're interacting, which pieces of content they're struggling with, which ones they're satisfied with, right? And that ends up driving a lot of downstream optimization opportunities, whether that's in terms of the program performance, right, and how to activate or engage additional patients, or in driving actual messaging strategy downstream, because you now understand which types of patients are most likely, for example, to enroll in a nurse support program once they've been exposed to a call to action in an access program, right? And those types of insights can be incredibly powerful because in today's world, it's very hard to mine agent phone calls to get to these types of quantitative and qualitative insights about your patient. So we see this not just as an automation opportunity, but one that's much more about understanding your actual patient population and how they're interacting with your therapies in the real world.
Yeah, that's total next level insights, right, Justin? You're really getting down to the micro level when you talk about measuring at a conversational dimension with patients at scale, right?
Totally.
Okay, cool. Well, if you would like to learn more about this solution, there is a case study on the LifeLink Systems website resource library, which features Ron Lacey, VP of Products and Innovation at UBC, one of the leading hub services companies out there. And it's 20 minutes of Ron explaining exactly how they're doing a lot of what we just talked about here. So I urge you to go to the website at lifelinksystems.com and give it a look. Gentlemen, that's been an insightful demonstration. Thanks so much for the time, and we'll do it again.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Greg.
Hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Chatbot Roadshow. You can find other solution demos in our resource library at lifelinksystems.com.